Our speaker today is Freeson Daugherty. Freeson is a professional life coach and a priest of the Order of Melchizedek, but his ministry actually started much earlier, at the age of 17, when he was a missionary to Brazil for an organization known as Service for Peace. In 2005, he joined a special task force with whom he visited 21 different countries performing fundraisers and humanitarian projects. He's been published in the award-winning Kingmaker magazine based in Washington, D.C., and operates a YouTube channel on which are available dozens of life coaching videos. So please welcome Freeson Daugherty.
Man, I love the way Lloyd introduces people. It makes even people like me seem important. Okay, well, wow, yeah, I really like that inspirational reading this morning. Because, the whole thing of like being awake and being, asleep. And this is actually the second time I've given this sermon. Because the first time I gave it was actually last night in my dream. But this one's actually off to a good start because in this one I'm wearing pants. So, so who was here for last week's sermon? Remember that? Okay, great. So this talk was roughly inspired by this book, Wherever You Go, There You Are. And I don't have time to read it in entirety, so... Did it work? I don't know. I'm not an indigenous, medicine man, so I'll just fingers crossed. So yeah, I've talked about a lot of things since I've been sharing here with the fellowship. The first talk I gave was about nothing. And my second talk was about sin and religion. So I said, well, let's shake it up a little bit. Let me just try and tackle the most perplexing question that has plagued humanity since the dawn of time, which is, what is this thing, the ego, and how to seek enlightenment? So without further ado, let us begin. So quick show of hands. Who here, if they had the option, would like to completely eradicate their ego? Ego. Completely get rid of ego. No more ego. Yeah? Great. And then another show of hands. If you had, what's, how to put this? Who here would like to achieve enlightenment or attain enlightenment? I think that's pretty much universal, right? Well, I got good news and bad news. And this is an interactive talk, so you guys get to choose which side you get to hear first. So what do you want, the good news or the bad news? Bad news? Okay. The bad news is, unfortunately, you can't get rid of the ego entirely. Because if you did, you would have no way to understand your own existence. You would essentially have the consciousness lesser than a cucumber. The reason why that is the ego gives us contrast. It helps us understand, what this life experience is. And the good news is, as far as enlightenment goes, is you're already enlightened. Now let that sink in for a minute. I know, me personally, I don't feel enlightened right now, even though I am. And that's because I'm asleep. So the whole concept of sleeping and waking, and I think Buddha said it best. When he reached enlightenment, he went back to whence he came, and he was talking with the gurus and the holy men of that land, and they noticed that there's something really profoundly different about this guy. And they said, "Oh, are you a god?" And he said, "No." "Are you an avatar?" "No." "Are you a man?" "No." "What are you?" And he says, "I'm awake." I'm awake. So, if enlightenment is being awake, then we already essentially are enlightened. The only thing is, those who don't feel enlightened are just simply asleep, and that's okay. So let me expand a little bit upon, what the ego is and the primary function of the ego. One, I like using visual analogies because this is kind of how I think. Picture, if you could, a black and white photo, and imagine that this is your life, the view of your life. Ego is the contrast part of that photo. If you have too much contrast, effectively it's completely blacked out and you can't see anything. That's what the ego does when it's out of balance. Everything just becomes blackness. But then on the flip side, if you had not enough ego, and ego is just completely gone, no contrast at all, it'd be completely whited out, and you wouldn't be able to see what the picture is at all. So yeah, ego has a very valid purpose. It has a function. Now, the label of this talk is ego is not the enemy, and it's time to wake up. So there's kind of like a double meaning there. Let's wake up to the idea that we have to just get rid of our egos, that it's an evil, terrible thing. Because what the ego does is it has a couple jobs. It's the dreamer, it's the survivalist, it's the judge and jury, it's the storyteller. And all these things are relevant, and they're important. There's a funny story. I don't know how funny you'll think it is. I thought it was pretty hilarious. About an Indian guru that has been trying to achieve this level of complete ego death, have no more ego whatsoever, feel completely one with the universe, one with nature, be able to talk with the animals and have no fear or anxiety whatsoever. And try as he may, he could not attain it. So one day he was just screaming to the universe, "Give me what I want! I want no more fear! I want to be able to commune with nature! I want to be able to talk to animals! I want to have, be ever present and feel one with everything!" And the universe actually replied this time and said, "Really? Do you really want this? Do you know exactly what you're asking for? I don't care anymore! Just give it to me!" Okay. And then all of a sudden, bliss washed over him. Everything was perfect and beautiful. He was actually able to understand what the birds were chirping about. And then he just decided to go off into the wilderness, and he was experiencing everything like it was for the first time. And then, as he was communing with nature and just experiencing what it is to be a tree and to be a flower, a tiger comes along. And he's able to commune with the tiger, and he sees how beautiful the tiger is, and he says, "Wow, I'm beautiful as a tiger." And he could hear the tiger, and the tiger was saying, "Wow, you're beautiful too." Yeah, we're both beautiful. And the tiger says, "You know what, I'd like to have you over for lunch." "Wow, okay, well, I have some dietary restrictions. Is it vegan?" And then the tiger says, "Well, it was." Sorry, that was a bit of a dark joke. But I mean, the point is, there is a valid reason for fear. It keeps us alive. And that's part of what the ego does, is it gives us that ability to know that, well, this is a great experience, but maybe getting eaten by a tiger is not really something we want to actually have. There needs to be boundaries there. And that's what the ego does. And then, going on to storytelling and dreaming, that's really important too. I don't think anybody here ever freaked out after they heard the story of Hansel and Gretel, to actually believe that there's a crazy lady in the woods with a gingerbread house, abducting children. Nobody felt the need to dial 911 because we know that that's a story. The problem with ego is it tells us stories that are very convincing, and we start to believe that they're real, and that starts to separate us from our reality, and we start to feel trapped and isolated because we buy into the stories that the storyteller is selling. And then dreaming is really important. Most of the most amazing inventions that were ever fabricated came first from dreams. But if we spend our whole lives dreaming, that's essentially being in a coma. So, just to reiterate, ego is not evil. It's usually just out of balance. That's all it is. So, with that, I'd like to tell you a little bit about my experience, because I did actually have an awakening experience. And it was pretty interesting. How it started, like most awakening experiences, started with Oprah Winfrey. Oprah Winfrey was having an interview with Eckhart Tolle, and he was explaining to her the art of mindfulness and the benefits thereof. And I started thinking to myself, is it possible that you could focus on more than just breathing? Because that was his thing. He says, just focus on your breathing, and then the ego falls away, and then you are there. Well, he didn't really say where you were. He just said you were there. So I suppose a pretty good place. And then I was like, okay, well, let me try and focus on some other stuff. So I was focusing on the sensation of walking and flavor and texture of food, and really trying to listen to music and noticing how the leaves, play in the wind. And what that did is it rooted me in the present moment. And that's effectively what meditation is. It's focus. That's one thing that all meditation, no matter what meditation practice it is, it all has focus in it. And what came about from that state of just always being present was some pretty interesting side effects. I was never bored. I was filled with inspiration and energy at all times. Everything was fascinating. Food was incredibly delicious. Music was sensational. I mean, the list goes on. But then the really resounding question is, why did you ever go back to sleep if it was that good? Well, the honest answer to that is, I don't know. I don't know. And it really ate at me for a while. I said, why did I ever leave that place? It was blissful. It was beautiful. It was everything I ever wanted. But one thing that I didn't notice is that there can be too much of a good thing. There was this one toxicology specialist that Ruth and I were listening to the other day about like cosmetic toxicology. And he was saying everything under the sun effectively is poisonous in the right dosage. The dosage is really important. If you have too much, it's really too much. Even water, one of the most like benign, essential things for our life, is poisonous with too much of a dosage. So when I started to see that even in that kind of nirvanic bliss, there is a valid purpose for coming back down where I can come to a space of reflection, judgment, analyzing, digesting, and then to go back to that awakened state and not stay asleep indefinitely. So I was able to breathe a little easier after coming to that realization. And that only actually came to me recently after I started trying to formulate this talk. Because I was really struggling with, why don't I just stay awake all the time? I call those holy insomniacs. I guess the few holy insomniacs is maybe Jesus, Buddha, and Paul Solomon. Just kind of always just ever present and just that that authentic wisdom just pouring from them at all times. But that's the exception for most normal people. I think it's quite healthy to have a balance between being asleep and waking up, and being asleep and waking up. And every time we go to sleep, we dream and we collect, we reflect, and then when we wake up, we know more about this experience of what it is to be alive than we did the first time. Just like days, as you wake up, you usually know a little more every time you see a new sunrise. So I just want to share a brief realization that I had about what is my greatest value as a human being. And, as a motivational speaker and life coach, I thought it was effectively my ability to teach people stuff. Talk a good talk and show, have them try on ideas that they haven't, tried on before. And then when I was talking to my younger brother, who recently decided that he was an atheist, I was actually telling him about that technique of slapping the book, right, from last week's sermon. And he just rolled his eyes and, oh, that's BS. I can't believe you believe in that nonsense, just really being quite rude about it. And it was devastating to me, not because he didn't believe what I believed, but I felt in that space I had no value to give him anymore. Like my currency was, giving people things to chew on, ideas to reflect on. And he basically said, your currency is no longer valid with me. It was crushing, it was devastating. But then I remembered that that's not my greatest value. My greatest value is not what I know. My greatest value is who I get to be for him. That's my greatest value. And it's kind of like that saying, it's not what you know, it's who you know. It's not what you do, it's who you be. This is really where, as human beings, we shine and we have the most tremendous impact on other humans' lives. It's not really so much what Jesus did, because he did some pretty interesting things, but who he was really what, shook the earth to its foundations and has changed so many people's lives. It's not really what Buddha did, but who Buddha was that was so meaningful and valuable to other people. And this society that we live on, we've become obsessed with worshiping, doing all the time. And there's actually a funny joke in this book that John Kabat-Zinn says. He says, "Why?" It's like, don't just do something. Sit there. Because it's a little counterintuitive. We're like, well, we got to do something. Don't sit there, do something. But no, don't just do something. Sit there. Because being is a really important part about being alive. One analogy that I use to illustrate this is, again, I'm a visual person and I'm also a car guy. There's probably no car people here, so bear with me. But it's called gas pedals and brake pedals. Now, imagine trying to drive a car and you don't have a brake pedal. All you have is you're just mashing on the gas all the time. And you're a really safe driver, but you're eventually going to crash into something or someone. It's inevitable. There's no way to get around that. And then imagine if you had a car that only had a brake pedal. You'd never go anywhere. You'd just be stuck where you are. But when you have that ability to play between the two, know when to hit the accelerator, when to squeeze on the brake, you can get wherever you choose to go in life very effectively and safely. And this is why I feel that it's not really ego or core self that's really the answer. It's balance between the two. One's the gas, ego, and the brake, core self, slowing down and stopping. And both are vitally important, and neither can really be too valuable without the other. And so then the question is, well, how do we put this stuff into practice? These are really great ideas, but how do we make this stuff actually work? Well, I have some suggestions. One suggestion is that, I don't get any money for this, but check out this author. He's a medical doctor. He's retired now. He used to practice out in Massachusetts, and he discovered the practice of mindfulness to help his patients recover faster from surgery and to manage pain. And then after seeing the dramatic effects with his patients, he really got into this stuff. So he's written dozens of books on this topic. So this is a really great place to start. But one thing that I would say to anybody who's trying to get more into a space of mindfulness and meditation and reflectiveness is these core places to start. You got to remember, it's incredibly simple, but it's not easy. And for us to feel, because we understand this, we should be able to do it. But, everybody understands how to exercise, but not everybody does it. Because it's simple but not easy. And there's a lot of patience that's required of us to learn how to be a different way, especially if we're not used to being that way. Being in a state of mindfulness is incredibly natural but unfamiliar, is the best way I could put that. And you have to train yourself to get there. And I would also recommend that you start slow. Like, pick one thing and say, okay, today I'm going to choose this one thing to do mindfully. Today, as I'm just eating breakfast, I'm really going to reflect on what this breakfast tastes like, what that sensation is. Or I say, today I'm really going to reflect on walking. I'm really going to try and take in and soak in the sensation of what it feels like to be walking. Because that's effectively what mindfulness is. It's a type of meditation where instead of you trying to shut everything out, you're trying to pull everything in. You're focusing on everything you can. And, that's why I said it's a very natural way to be. And be patient. It takes time to get good at this. And that's one thing that I didn't understand. I thought I was pretty good at it. I'm still very much a beginner. Got the training wheels on. And then last and certainly not least, relax. One of my favorite speakers, Tony Robbins, was saying, he says, the way your body goes, so your emotions go as well. So if you're trying to relax, notice how your shoulders are. You might relax your shoulders a little bit. If you're feeling tension in your face, relax your face. And then you'll start to feel that sensation, that emotion of being relaxed. So that's one helpful tip on that way. And then to, try and wrap all this up all together with the core essence of that path of discovering, awakening, and enlightenment is fundamentally focus over fantasy. being present and really focusing on what is, as opposed to fantasizing on how we would like it to be, or how we feel it should be, as opposed to the way it is. And that's really the key, that missing element that's going to guide us down this path of finding that natural cycle of waking and sleeping. Thank you.